So, hello and welcome to today's webinar. Our topic today is from reacting to responding in times of change, fostering self-awareness and resilience. My name is Kerry-Ann Deer and I'm part of the sector sustainability team here at Community Legal Centres, Queensland. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are holding this webinar today. In Brisbane, where I'm based, this is the Turrbal and Jagera people. I wish to pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging and acknowledge the really important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders continue to play in our society. As this webinar is being viewed by people across Queensland and we believe Australia, I'd like to also pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land throughout our beautiful country and extend a warm welcome to any First Australians listening today. So today we're being joined by Dr. Mendy Nerelak, and Mendy will be talking to us to help us develop a deeper understanding about stress and our attitude to it. And she's going to take a deeper dive into how self-awareness and understanding of our own attitude and tolerance for stress can increase our resilience to it, and how in some ways stress might be able to be a positive thing. I'll let Mendy tell you a bit more about what she's going to do in a moment, but I just wanted to let you know today's webinar is being recorded and we'll have that recording available to download today or probably tomorrow at the latest. The PowerPoints and the other materials have been emailed out to everybody who registered, and they're available, or they will be emailed out, and they're available to download from our website and from the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, so there's a great way you can participate today. In your control panel, it should be on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a chat box. And so if you have a question that arises during the presentation, you can tap that question into the box. And at the right time, I'll be following the questions and the chat, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to read your question out. At the end of the session, we hope to have some time for Q&A and a bit more interaction. We've got nearly 100 people on board today, so yeah, well, if there are a lot of questions, we might need to take some on notice, or we'll respond as we go. So, look, just a bit of background. You've probably, if you've been with us for the last few weeks, we've been running a series that's related to wellbeing and ensuring the welfare of all employees in community legal centres and all workplaces in the current COVID-19 pandemic has been paramount. This is really applicable wherever work's being carried out, whether it's you're working from home or whether you're back in the office or you're out on the road. A safe physical environment, including safe systems of work, means that workers can carry out their responsibilities in a harmless way. So safety also extends to psychological safety, and the importance of supporting the well-being of our co-workers and ourselves has featured pretty prominently in the news and social media. And there's a lot of resources. I think if you've been doing webinars, you've probably come across one or two already. We're getting pretty well resourced in the area. And I think upon reflection, we have learned to adapt and respond to our new situation, but it's all about to change again as the lockdowns are reduced and taken away, and many of us are preparing to come back to work to what probably isn't going to be still a normal environment for some time. So recognising a novel, sorry, no pun intended, set of stresses in our workplaces has really, I guess, spurred us to keep going with sharing these webinars and looking at the structural and our legislative obligations, and now taking a bit of a deeper dive into the personal elements. So we're so fortunate today to have Dr. Mendy Nerelak as our guest presenter. Mendy is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Brisbane, and her approach to working with clients integrates a somatic, or that's an in-body based experience, with cognitive or therapies about thinking and our minds, along with fostering self-awareness, mindfulness and spiritual practice when she's working with her clients. So, Mendy, welcome. It's great to have you on board today.
Thank you, Kerry-Ann. Thank you for that beautiful intro. and for inviting me to be part of this webinar series. It's really an honor to share my work with all of you. I'm really grateful for the huge turnout, and I'm really hoping to offer something helpful and useful to everyone today that you can really start to integrate immediately. And that's my main kind of aim always, is to give you all something useful.
Well, from what I know about your work, Mandy, there'll be lots of great takeaways, and we are at capacity, so there's been lots of interest. So in relation to stress at work, it's nothing new, and when we've got these feelings of stress building, it can be hard to see the wood for the trees. To find that space to pause and figure out, well, how could I be doing this differently? Something like a key person in your team leaves, or the printer breaks down, or a co-worker seems to be using a certain kind of tone in their voice with you, or there's a global pandemic. So, perhaps we can just deal with it, or how can we intentionally choose our responses, remain open and curious to the various stresses of life, and particularly at work, so that we might be able to see the challenges and the opportunities that these bring? I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, Carrie-Anne. Thank you. Yeah, basically, this quote by Viktor Frankl, I think, is just why I chose it. Really kind of covers the answer to that. And you said, how can we sort of choose how we're going to be in this new world, and how can we manage all the things, all the multiple kind of stresses in our life that range from the very mundane things like, getting ready for work and juggling kids, through to, managing our 100 emails in the morning, through to more serious things like having hard conversations, dealing with loss, managing financial stresses, and like you just said, dealing with a global pandemic, and now, what to make of how we're going to be with systemic racism that's come up more recently. So Viktor Frankl has this beautiful quote. He says, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response allows our growth and freedom." So I suppose what I'm going to be talking a little bit about today is how we can really recognize that space, how we can know what's happening within our bodies and minds as we kind of come upon stress, and how we can learn to navigate that, and almost in a way, maybe welcome stress is too much of a stretch, but how we can not be afraid to approach it. Okay, so there's a lot of research now that's sort of saying, if you have an attitude towards stress that is that you hate it and you want to get rid of it and it's something to be avoided, the psychological impacts of that same stress is greater than if you had an attitude that is stress is a necessary part of life, and can I learn how to be with it? So as an overview, I suppose I've just touched on a little bit of that about stress. I'm going to introduce to you what I have found personally, and then every single one of my clients that I see find helpful. It's a model or a framework for understanding our nervous system. It's called the window of tolerance. So we're spending a little bit of time setting the scene here for what we can do to kind of stretch that space between something that's happened and how we respond by building our repertoire of resources. Okay. And then towards the end of the talk, I'm going to try and get to some values work and setting intention. And I really want to talk about some boundaries as well, all of which can help us build resilience and help us navigate change while staying cool, calm, and collected. Yeah. So rather than a big kind of technical definition of stress, I really love this one by Kelly McGonigal, and it really encompasses quite a lot in a small statement. So stress is what arises when something is at stake. And to highlight what I see as the kind of poignant or important parts there, it really encompasses what we all may kind of acknowledge as stressful. So this is how stress feels physiologically. This is what I'm thinking when I'm stressed. These are my beliefs around stress. These are the emotions that arise. That can be anything from disappointment through to overwhelm, panic, and anger, burnout, and through to what we do about it. And then this other important part, that something is at stake here. So stress in this context signals that something really important is happening here.
So this is really interesting. I'll chat a little bit while Mendy's getting her audio back together. Those reactions in the body, it wasn't really something that I was aware of until, you know, I guess a few years back, that stress wasn't just something that was happening in my mind, that it was, you know, manifesting in things like not sleeping or digestive issues or, you know, pain or, you know, just those general sort of feelings of being unwell. And while there's that, I guess that stress we need to get us up in the morning, when stress becomes too much, it actually becomes debilitating. So I can't take over Mendy's presentation, but I'm going to get her to hopefully pop back online soon. So I'll take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what Community Legal Centres Queensland has been doing with our wellbeing series. A lot of you, if you're regulars, you would have attended the presentation with Matt Bannon from WorkCover Queensland a couple of weeks back. So Matt really set the stage about why, you know, it's so important to focus on, I guess, psychological safety and wellbeing at work. Matt was able to give us a rundown of the legislation and give us some good strategies for obviously supporting a worker when a work cover claim, you know, was perhaps in the pipeline, or when there'd been an injury at work that looked like needed some treatment or time away. Then we had, mostly for CLCQ members, so those of you outside of the organisations wouldn't have been able to attend our presentations on leadership during COVID-19 and also managing remote teams. And we'll be heading into some future conversations with hopefully Jan Ungra. We'll be talking about conversations at work, but I think we might have Mendy back online now. No, we don't. So I feel like a radio announcer doing the morning show, the early morning show. You don't know who's out there. Yeah, so it's, I think, you know, if you look at the rates of the increasing rates of psychological injury, and certainly the claims that Matt was able to point out in the work cover presentation, this is something that we're just increasingly getting on board with in our workplaces, and you know, policies, procedures, and not just kind of saying we'd have a zero tolerance towards bullying, or, you know, we try not to give people work that makes them stressed. It's actually being proactive in terms of having a strategy for wellbeing. You know, how do we brainstorm those ideas about what we all think is a state of wellbeing, and how do we, you know, structure our work in a way that helps us to stay well at work and balance our life responsibilities. I think we've got beyond the point now of pretending that we don't have real and demanding lives outside of work. And increasingly, the presentations I've been listening to have been about, you know, saying how much of a relief, in fact, some of the aspects of COVID-19 have been, because it's enabled us to much better balance our work and life juggle.
Wonderful. Okay, so now that you can see it, I'll quickly run through. So at the top edge of the window and the bottom edge of the window is kind of like, between that is our kind of little comfort zone. And it's kind of a sweet place to be. You know, it's lovely, sort of our energy moves up and down throughout the day. And what can happen is we can hit a moment where something happens, and basically it's a choice point. One option, and you may not feel you're choosing this, but we'll talk about that in a moment, is that you react and you fly up quickly out of your window into hyperarousal. So the energy gets overwhelming, it gets too much. And here you might kind of experience emotions such as anxiety, panic, rage, and that's that fight, flight, or freeze response. It's very reactive, our minds are offline, and we're not able to think creatively out of that situation. You kind of have to write it out. And then I talked about similarly going down into the bottom edge of that window. So after our adrenals have been firing quite a lot, sometimes we don't even sort of drop down into the middle part of the window. We kind of just keep on going and we bottom out, and we can get kind of heavy, tired, lethargic, and you know, some of the emotions around that can be depression, sadness, grief, disappointment. Okay, so that was just a quick overview of what I talked about before. But the important part here, I think, for the group today is this alternative part where we are aware of what's going on in our bodies when we hit that event, when that event happens. We're able to notice stress rising, but we have the resources, or we engage the resources that we need to keep ourselves steady and calm in that moment, to move perhaps into the edge of that window or even a little bit beyond that window like I've illustrated there. In that space, we still might be experiencing that stress response, but in a milder version, so it can be intense. It's a little bit like what's happening for me now, but our mind is still online and we're actually actively able to choose what we're going to do in this moment. Okay, so if you want to click over to the next slide, I'll just illustrate that in the benefits of that. You know, why would you even do that? Well, firstly, no one likes to kind of experience those intense kind of feelings of being out of control. But the sweet part here is as we learn how to approach stressful events and shift our patterns into being more awake and alert and aware while that's happening, and intentionally move into our window or our edge, our window can start to widen. So what that means is when we have a wider window, we are able to handle more and more challenges in our life. So that stressful event that might have pushed us out of our window, you know, a month ago, no longer does that. And we stay well within our window, alert, engaged, comfortable, and thinking rationally and creatively. And the same goes down for the bottom of that window where, you know, if we can manage disappointments and feelings of sadness and loss without kind of really going heavily into the lower realms of that, the lower parts of our energy system, we're able to sort of be with disappointing feelings without feeling like they're going to last forever, and do what we need to do to sort of bring ourselves back into the center. Okay, so if we take the next slide then, Carrie-Anne or Carly, whoever's on the operating system here, there's these two scenarios that I think may be very relatable to many of your members, and it was certainly relatable to me. Is that what happens, or what we can typically see, say, as we kind of navigate or watch our energy, say, just across the day. Energy starts off in the middle, and then we start to hit these little moments or hit these little events that happen. And, you know, this could be rushing to work, answering those emails, having a difficult conversation. And, you know, these can accumulate across a day or a week or a month or a year, say. And if we aren't able to adequately resource ourselves to bring ourselves more deeper within the center part of our window or back to balance, then we kind of sort of just maintain our energy system in a very high, or, you know, right on the edge of our window. Our arousal is kind of going to be more easily triggered when we're up at the top of that window and kind of staying there constantly. So what might happen at the end is it could even be a very insignificant moment or event that happens that really just trips you up and sends you off into space, basically, you know, in some sort of overreactive situation. And I know that every single person can relate to that. We've all kind of snapped at somebody or really felt like, you know, that was a little bit over the top, the way I responded to that. But what we haven't recognized is that there's been this build up, and we haven't been able to sort of consistently and constantly and consciously, sorry, bring ourselves back into balance. Yeah. And then if we go on to the next slide, this is a little bit different because what I've demonstrated is kind of like getting stressed and reacting in that very hyper aroused way. But one thing that is that I can relate to, you know, I can be a bit of an avoider. So this is about kind of being comfortable and wanting to stay comfortable, and a little bit like I want to avoid stress. I don't want to do that scary thing. So we might hit upon a situation, and it might be something that we want or something that we know would be good for us, but it just feels a little bit too much to do that. And so we say no, or we avoid it, or we turn away from it in some way. And in that moment, what happens is we feel better and we do come back into balance because we don't have to do that scary thing. But over time, that refusal to go to our edge can mean that we're not being challenged. Life becomes a little bit dull. And we can kind of get a little bit disappointed that, you know, we don't really, not doing anything meaningful or interesting. And we can sometimes find, and this is where burnout happens, I think, sometimes, is that we kind of go, well, you know, what's the point? And we can kind of dip below our window and kind of find ourselves stuck in that kind of low arousal zone of being bored and depressed or disappointed with our current situation.
So it's kind of like maybe, Mindy, having goals and, you know, having things that you really want in life, but not being able to get to them. Like always, you know,
yeah,
getting so close and never close enough.
Yeah, that's right. Sort of going, I really want that, but then we don't end up doing that thing, right? And my life's peppered with those situations, right? Eventually I get there. I say I'm a bit of a slow learner and a late bloomer. You know, sometimes it takes me a long time to do some of the things that I really want. So this is my challenge here. And, but I don't want people to beat themselves up for that, because what can happen is we can, maybe we're not actually feel like we can't cope and we don't have the resources, and that may be true. That doing that thing may really push us right out of our window and make us panic or feel terrible and maybe set ourselves up for what we think is a disaster. So the key here is that we learn to, well, we build our resources, and that's basically, you know, the majority of what I want to be talking to you all about today. So if we want to just push or move into the next slide, does that sound okay, Carrie-Anne? Does that resonate? If we want to move to the next slide. Ooh.
How's that slide for you, Mindy? We're on a slide.
Perfect.
An amazing looking tent.
You're on that.
Yeah.
Oh, great. And this is a little signal for me. This is a little. Oh, Pepper. What's happening?
No, we're not. We're at the Pema Chodron quote. So if our
you're at the Pema
huge stone wall with a door in it, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, let's take this moment just to take a little breather. I just want to talk about the window of tolerance just for a moment, because if you can start to sort of think about what is happening in your own nervous system at any given moment during the day, when something is happening, and reflect on maybe your pattern of how do I respond across the day, and where am I in my window, that's actually starting to build that sort of self-awareness that we really, really need to start to choose how we're going to be. And you might see or start to see, you know, what other people's windows are like, and maybe what the windows of your clients are like as well. So, and we all have different windows. And the thing is, maybe we have a big window at school, at work, and maybe a smaller window at home, or vice versa. So we can have different windows in different situations.
I think that's really,
so now
yeah. That's really
so go ahead.
When you mention clients, Mandy, because often we're working with people in the community legal sector or legal professions, and our clients are in an agitated state, or they're experiencing extreme circumstances in their life, and perhaps recognizing where they're at. Also, it helps us to increase our empathy or our patience and understanding. So it's all very useful.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sort of starting to go, well, that's where they're, I mean, it's obviously no excuse for bad behavior, right? But so you can start to choose how you might respond to that, but you can start to hold some perhaps greater wisdom around why that might be the case for that person, and even inquire about it. Okay. So, so I've love this quote by Pema Chodron, and I won't dwell on it too much, but it's got that lovely image of doorways as well. And she talks about, you know, she says, if our edge is like a huge stone wall with a door in it, how do we learn to open that door and step through it again and again? Our life becomes the process of growing up, becoming more flexible, fearless, and more able to play like a raven in the wind, implying, you know, there's freedom there in that. So the answer, I suppose, is that we're willing to be vulnerable, and that if we can accept that stress is something that is going to happen, regardless of whether we want it or not, can we learn to build our resources so that we can trust ourselves in that moment, and we can cope when those doors do open for us, or if we're shut through them. Right? Sometimes we not always feeling like we really want to. Okay, so I've mentioned resources a few times already, and this is a pretty chunky quote by Pat Ogden, but I think it's quite rich. Okay, so she says that resources are skills, abilities, objects, relationships, and services that provide support for maintaining a sense of self and differentiation from others. This is boundaries, regardless of what is occurring in the environment. When individuals are resourced, they're able to adjust to and respond in a balanced and creative way to a wide variety of events and interactions, while sustaining autonomy in the face of stressful situations such as strong criticism, intense emotional expression, or potentially disturbing behavior coming from others. So it really covers a lot. And I hope you're on that quote at the moment in the slide, but it talks about that resources can come from within and also outside of us. And that if we can start to learn and grow our resources, this is going to be really beneficial for us. So, you know, as our stresses grow, as the situations in our lives, or as we encounter more and more challenge in our life, we really need to be committed to sort of building our repertoire of resources to the same degree. And I'm going to stress that a couple of times today, because I think that's really important. It's not enough to just say, oh, I breathe deep. Right, so we need to be able to go, I've got so much in my backpack of resources that it's basically which one do I choose and what's going to be the best one here. So we want to move to the next slide. It's a picture of lovely clouds, and Carrie Ann, I do know that we're pushing right on the edge, so we might just be sort of talking resources today in terms of time, but I do want to do this practice. I think it's really vital. It's a bit of an experiential practice that I'm going to invite everyone to participate in, but of course you don't have to. You can just sit and listen. One of the most fundamental skills that we can grow to start this journey is self-awareness. And this little practice is something that I do for myself often, and I teach all of my clients as well. And I call it a little check-in. I mean, it's a little mindfulness practice, but I don't want you to think that you have to sit down in meditation to do this, or to have a meditative pose. It'll probably feel a little bit like that today, but really this is something that I would want you all to start to consider doing while you're in your car, while you're talking to your colleagues, while you're talking to your clients, while you're sitting in meetings, and even while you're listening to this webinar. So if you don't mind, it's like 2 or 3 minutes, I think, where just take the seat wherever you're at, and really feel yourself in your seat, actually. So that might be that you just contact your feet on the floor. Maybe take a deep breath and just feel on the breath out yourself sitting more deeply in the chair. So feel your hips and your legs on the cushions underneath you, and maybe rest your back on the support behind you if you have something there. So really get a sense that you're sitting and you're grounded where you are. And if you want, you can close your eyes, or you can just gaze at the beautiful clouds in front of you on the screen if that's what's there, and just turn your attention inwards towards your breath. So just follow your breath in and out. It might take a little while for mind to settle, but see if you can just turn your attention to the breath coming in and the breath going out. Just follow that for a few rounds, just noticing its quality, noticing how the breath feels in your body, how it feels physically. Notice now, going a little deeper into your body, notice your body itself and the sensations that are there. So feel your attention moving into your torso, down into your legs and feet, into your back, shoulders and arms, into your neck and head. And see if you can just contact just some physical sensations that are there. These might be things like tension, or softness, or buzzing, or tingling. No need to analyze or understand why anything is there or what's going on. I think you can just notice sensations in the body. Now, you already may be aware of thoughts intruding or distracting you. So in the same way, can you be aware of yourself thinking? It's almost like you just step back a little and just observe yourself thinking. Perhaps even say something to yourself like, I notice myself thinking, or judging, or worrying, or analyzing. And then just come back to the breath and come back to the body. And then go a little deeper inside where you maybe can contact some sort of emotion. Just explore, what emotion is here for me in this moment. And maybe name it or feel it in the body. How does it feel in the body? And again, no judgment, no analysis. It could be an easy emotion or a more challenging emotion. Can you just observe it? And then just get a sense of the overall feeling of energy within your body. Do you feel like your energy is high or low, heavy or light? And again, just notice and come back to your breath. And take a deep breath in and out. And just get a sense of this whole inner space inside of breath, of body sensations, of emotions and thoughts and energy. And then start to guide your attention outwards now by contacting sound. So we just move into the outer world through our senses and just notice what you can hear. And then notice what you can feel on your skin. And notice what you can perhaps smell and taste, a little more subtle. And if your eyes are closed, just start to blink them sort of open. And if your eyes are already open, just start to widen your gaze and just look around the space that you're sitting in. And maybe you can sort of see that space or see what you can see in a new way. Maybe just name an object. Notice the walls, the floor, the ceilings, the windows. And then when you're ready, just sort of turn your gaze once more to the screen or to whatever is in front of you. Take a deep breath. Right. So that little practice is kind of like a way that we can stretch time and space in a way. If we can start to just take a moment to just check in with what is actually happening in this moment inside me, what is actually happening in this moment outside me. Now, I know most of you are probably sitting there in a pretty mostly relaxed kind of state, so it can have a very calming meditative effect to do that. So we want to practice doing stuff like that when we are calm and relaxed so that we can actually bring that forward when we start to get a little bit more aroused or start to get pushed towards the edge of our window because we've encountered something that has triggered us. Okay, so it'll be interesting if anyone wants to sort of note in the chat what that's like for you, how that feels for you, that's interesting to you. If you have any questions, please do that. And Carrie Ann, if we want to move to the next slide, then we're going to cover these resources that I'm talking about. And the first two slides are going to be based on breath work and body work. And the reason I do that is because when we're kind of more hyper aroused and when we're over our window, remember I said that our mind isn't really online. So sort of like thinking our way through or trying to rationalize isn't really going to cut it. So we do need to have a good kind of chunk of breath-based and body-based practices to kind of help bridge that space. So, and if you can see on the slides there that I've divided these up into breathing practices and later body practices that are both calming or activating, or a bit of both, balancing. So I was going to practice one of these, and maybe Kerry, and you can kind of flag whether that is appropriate at this point in time given timing, but I will talk through a couple just so that they can make sense to you. And
yeah, I think definitely
want to make, yeah.
Keep going, Mandy.
Say again,
we're kind of we're on a little cloud here at CLCQ, so please keep going. The comments are really positive. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so I've divided these up into kind of so I suppose the comment before where I said, you know, just deep breathing may not be enough, and sometimes it is adequate and it's totally okay, but we can kind of get a little bit more nuanced and skilled about it, and committed to kind of learning some of those more refined ways of resourcing ourselves, especially when you're in highly stressful situations. You want to be able to know what to turn to. And I've just made a little caveat here that you often may need to meet your mood first before you try and bring things back into balance. And what I mean by that is, just say that you're on the edge of your window, you're starting to feel that sort of rising tension, the tingles in your fingers, a little bit of sweat happening. It can be more helpful to do something that matches that energy, so is more of an active kind of breath practice, before you do the thing that is a little bit more calming and balancing. So, for instance, something that's a little bit more active, just say we're anxious, is that you might want to pull your breath right up high into your chest. That's a more active breath. And you might want to do that kind of high chest breathing for a few rounds before you come back down and do the more belly or abdominal breathing, which can have a more grounding and calming effect and bring you a little bit more firmly into the very center of your window. Just natural breath awareness, the balancing breath, just natural breath awareness is actually perfect to do when maybe you're having a cup of tea or you're kind of just sitting in a relaxed way. Just every now and again, just see if you can just notice the breath coming in and the breath going out, like we just did on that practice. And doing even counts. So I like to count breath, especially when I'm learning the skill. An even count of breath in and an even count of breath out will have that more balancing effect. So these are the kind of things that you can kind of do when nothing is really, when you're kind of well in your window and you're just building your resources. A calming breath is when the breath out is longer. So if you're looking to kind of really ground and anchor, if you do a 4-count breath in and try and stretch that exhale to about 8 counts, that too. And you might even want to try that now, you know, taking, you know, just a 4-count breath in and just starting to stretch that exhale. You might start to feel yourself really maybe drop into your chair, or you might start to feel a heaviness in your body. And you might want to counter that perhaps with just a more conscious and active breath in, so really pulling that breath up high and then just letting the breath out come naturally. So start to be willing to experiment, particularly when you're kind of just learning. You know, this is skill building here. But what I want to practice right now is this stair step breath, which I've got in the balancing section, but it's got this sort of magical quality of being both activating and calming. So you could use it with anyone. And since probably most of you are in a kind of a relaxed kind of mode, just observe how it feels in your body. So tricky when I'm just talking to you about this, but if you can kind of visualize a set of stairs going up and like a slippery slide going down, that's kind of what we're going to be doing with the breath. So you're going to sip a little bit of the breath in and then pause, and then sip another step of breath in and pause, and then we're going to sip one more, usually up to 3, sometimes 4. Hold it just for a moment and then breathe out. So let's just do that. Just 3 breaths. That's all we're going to do. So just take a breath in and a breath out just naturally. And the next time you breathe in, you're just going to breathe in a little sip of breath and hold it. You can close your eyes here if you like. Sip again, hold, one more time, sip, hold, and then breathe all the way out through the nose or the mouth. Let's do that twice more. Sip, sip, or step, and then out through the nose or the mouth. One more time, sip, sip, and again, and breathe all the way out. And then just close your eyes and just breathe naturally for a moment now. And just notice how that feels energetically in the body. Maybe you feel heavier, maybe you feel lighter. And just note that. Okay. There's a lot more here that you can read through. People are interested in the nostril breathing, but I won't go into that right now. But you might want to experiment with that yourself, right? So be willing to experiment and try. Now, if we want to just move to the next slide, we've got these, again, remember, we want to activate those kind of, these are, and body and breath are really accessible as well. You don't need anything, you don't need any equipment, it's there. So again, divided into calming, activating, and balancing. And the most fundamental is just, you know, can you be aware of your body sensations? A grounding practice is, can you be aware of your feet? Can you actually feel your feet right in this moment? Pushing against resistance is really helpful. This is, I actually did this before this talk. I could feel like buzzing in my arms. You know, pushing against the wall can help release some of that excess energy that's kind of useless. It's that fight or flight. It's useless in this situation, right? It's fight or flight. I'm not in danger here, but my arms are preparing to, you know, wail on somebody. I don't need that, so I need to kind of push that energy out. And using a wall or a ball or push-ups are great for that kind of thing too. Activating is always really tricky. We say, you know, psychologists, you know, give me an anxious person any day, because someone that's really low in that window, it's hard to get moving. So there has to be this commitment to moving the body when energy is low. So if you're feeling really dull, doing small things like even just swaying in your chair, gentle walking, gentle stretching, even with your hands right now, if you wanted to push your arms out in front of you or to the side or even above you, you can feel that that has a bit of an activating effect. Yeah. And with more intensity, if you're feeling kind of dull, but you've got the motivation to kind of do some extra work, you know, doing core work, using weight, resistance work, hit workouts, can be really great to get energy moving upwards into the middle of the window again. And just generally doing those balancing practices of, you know, committing to daily movement, to daily exercise, whatever that means for you, whether it's yoga, whether it's walking, whether it's running, whether it's even just dancing, you know, whatever it is to kind of help you feel a greater connection to your body. Okay. I just want to move on to the next slide now.
Wow, Mandy, yeah, I'm just getting my mouse onto the slide so I can move on. We're all in contorted poses here at CLCQ.
What's that? You're in what?
It's been the great thing about, I think, for some of us who've been able to work at home is that, you know, besides wearing our Ugg boots or our pajamas for a bigger part of the day, we sort of can be more in our bodies. You know, we can get up or walk to the garden, and you know, I think that it's an important thing to bring back to our workplaces. And just, we've got 3 in our room here. Of course, we're all socially distanced, but, you know, doing those movements together, I didn't feel self-conscious, did you? No. So thanks, Mandy. I'm going to go to your next slide now, but I thought I'd add that in, that, you know, this is something.
Oh, that's so perfect. If we can normalize this in the workplace, you know, that, you know what, I'm actually feeling a little bit such and such, I think I need to go just step out into the sun for 5 minutes and just feel the earth underneath my feet. I know that sort of sounds a little flaky. Well, it doesn't to me, but it can to some people, you know. And to be honest, I mean, I'm working from home as well. And in between every single client, I lie like a lizard in the sun on my belly in the grass. You know, it's just so, it has been very healing for me in that way.
Well, and that rush, Mandy, that the sun is supposed to be able to give us as well. So lots of reasons for that.
Yeah, I joke that I've just been deeply healed by doing just laying around. No. And that's that kind of stretching that window at the bottom as well, right? It's sort of like we're at the bottom. How deeply relaxed can we be without feeling like we're unmotivated and bottoming out?
That we should be doing
that we should be doing something. And that intentional being can be so useful in stretching our window at the bottom. Okay, so I've talked quite a lot about stretching our window at the top, but we want to be able to push that window at the bottom as well, so our range expands in both directions.
Yeah, and I think the idea that it's not just downtime at home. Like, I like the idea of also being able to have some downtime at work where we, you know, can talk or relax or just catch up on things. You know, the pace increasingly, especially in the last few years, well, in my experience at work, has just been that you get to the office and you go, and, you know, it's the end.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I've kind of thrown in those natural kind of little pause points in the slide. I've put some pretty pictures up and that kind of thing. And if you can find some natural pause points at work to do like that little check-in, or to just lean against the wall, or to do, you know, 3 to 5 deep, full breaths, it may feel like it's nothing, but it's actually really something. It really is something, because it has that cumulative effect, and you're really honoring yourself, and you're saying, I matter, and my nervous system matters, and I'll look after you. Especially when things are maybe not super intense, but like I had on that little graph, you know, that allostatic load, we're kind of really just committed to kind of bringing ourselves back into balance more and more frequently. Yeah. So we're hitting right up on 1 o'clock, Carrie-Anne. How far should I keep going?
Andy,
you let me know.
We've still got 93% of participants with us, so I'm
okay. Sure. I'll keep going.
Keep going. Yeah.
So, okay. So we've done some breath-based and body-based stuff, and that they can be those turn-to things in the moment when we're really hitting on something and we can't think. And some of these resources that I've got are really kind of things that we have to do kind of while we're in the moment, very calm, cool, and collected and rational. But like I just did with that self-awareness practice, you know, we're looking to kind of create a wise mind attitude, you know, that part of us that observes and can notice what's going on in our inner world and our outer world. So doing a practice like that regularly can help us really keep our minds clear and creative. Committing to a mindfulness or meditation practice or journaling, you don't have to do those things, but they can help. I do those things, but journaling is a fairly recent thing for me, and you know, I don't know why I've never done it before. I love it. Attention to dreams, it's kind of going a little deeper, but I thought I'd put that in because I know some people love their dreams and they can be real sources of kind of really getting to the source of things. But just that awareness of thoughts, of having that capacity to not get hooked and not buy into our habitual thoughts. So if you can start to name what thoughts you're having, not really the content of them, but more the style or the type of them, and you might start to notice that you have this habitual way of thinking, and it might be that, oh wow, I'm judging, or I'm criticizing here, or here I go in problem solving mode again. You know, maybe there's not a problem to solve, or I'm ruminating about the past, or I'm worrying about the future. So starting to kind of access, you know, what are those kind of surface thoughts doing, and then, you know, what am I, the inquiry is, and what's so bad about that, or what's so important about that, and you can start to access some deeper core beliefs and what might be your typical narrative. You know, it might be, you know, what Brené Brown calls that not good enough story, or I'm no good, or I'm unlovable, or I'm a disappointment, or everybody hates me. You know, so what's the story that you keep telling to yourself, and get to know it and catch yourself out. So once we can see our thoughts, we can start to really catch those thoughts happening and resource ourselves so that they're not having that impact on us. So, you know, it sounds a little naff here, but, you know, sort of saying something to yourself or to other people, I'm having the thought that. So that creates a little distance between yourself and the thought, so you can really observe it. And we need to, I suppose, once we contact those thoughts, be willing to really question where they came from, why we have them, and perhaps let go of them, or dismantle them and restructure them. Maybe we let them go. Maybe they're useful to a degree and we need to tweak them. The other thing that a lot of people have with my clients and people that I talk to have difficulty with is actually having a language for body. And so this is a cognitive resource. You know, can you talk about your body in a way that you can name it? So if you can kind of go, wow, I can feel my heart pounding and, you know, tension is squeezing in my belly, or I'm feeling heaviness or lightness or pressure or a blocked feeling. That's the language for your body that you can, when you can name something that's going on inside, you can kind of create a little space. That's space creating. That's creating that moment where you're able to see what's going on and start to choose what to do. If you know what's going on in your body, you're going to be able to choose the resource for yourself a little easier. And these other things are kind of more like supportive things again. It's sort of like, you know, having a real sense of self, that you're okay, that you are deserving, that you are worthy. Positive self-statements. And these are things like, I've actually got one. I'll share you mine. Like positive self-statement. This was, I'm feeling really vulnerable sharing this, but it was about this talk. It's like, I think I have to be something special, but I just have to be myself, you know? So it's this thing that I kind of say to myself to remind myself that it's, you know, whatever, it's okay. Just do my best, just be myself. And then being vulnerable, of course, using a gratitude practice. And you can do that formally, or you can just even in this moment, just contact something that you can be grateful for. You know, that's sort of taking us into those higher level emotions such as happiness and joy and bliss and peace, and learning to set intentions. So that's sort of bringing, getting very specific about how you want to be. Intention setting is a really great skill to learn, and setting some boundaries as well. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. And I'll just not skim over it. So those resources that we talked about, the body base here, breath base, the cognitive resources, sorry, are in the inner resources, and these are resources that come from outside of us. And they, where am I? They are about people that we have in our lives. And I've got here healthy brains, because sometimes we can, these are sort of supports, right? So we want healthy brains around us. So you might sort of identify people that maybe aren't so helpful and supportive. So you might want to set some boundaries around that. But these are about our friends, our partners, support groups, our spiritual community, if you have one. And it's about access. So having access to things like health clubs and classes, or special interest classes, book clubs, nature, having access to nature and having leisure activities, access to museums and art and artists and music, education, information. So these are things like internet and libraries. You know, if you don't have access to that, you're at a disadvantage, right? Access to practitioners that can help with our health, and access and capacity to earn money and save and pay bills. So as you kind of gone through that whole, you know, it's a fairly huge list of resources. You may not have even recognized that you've actually got a lot of these already, and that these are things that you can turn to. So that's really important. Some people don't even know that this is a resource and that they can use it. So use them. But it may also highlight, like, wow, I'm kind of lacking in this area, or I actually don't have that skill. So there's a commitment to a little bit, and being patient and kind with yourself, just starting to go, well, I do want to be able to handle myself better, or I do want to go for this opportunity, but I don't think I have the resources, so I'm going to commit to learning some so that I can call on them when I need to. All right, so if you want to move to the next slide, Carrie Ann. You just pull me up whenever. I'm just going to say, you just pull me up whenever. Okay, this is a tree signal for me to take a breath and maybe assess the situation.
and Mandy, if I could reflect on that last slide, and it's become really apparent to me, you know, working on this CLCQ wellbeing strategy, or, you know, starting to think about how we conceptualize wellbeing as a sector, is that wellbeing means something different to everybody. And, you know, if you've never encountered depression or, you know, a mental illness, then you may not have as much sort of understanding about what the impact might be. If you've if you're a physical person who you let out stress, you know, by going to the gym or having that run, then, you know, being able to have access to that as part of your work routine, your going to work routine, can be, you know, just as important as some of the emotional or cognitive things. And I think that if we're talking about well-being, then your last slide reminded me that we need to look at all aspects and all the resources we have that support us. So
that's right. And I suppose those external resources, for me personally, I mean, maybe not so much from those, I mean, I have access to all of those things, but I can be very incredibly self-reliant. So really kind of going, well, actually, I don't really turn to the people around me as much as maybe I could. And there are lots of people around me. So it might be, I can learn to access those resources and ask for help and contact those people and reach out when I'm feeling like I need some of that support. Yeah, so that's kind of like stretching your window of tolerance as well, to go, I'm going to lean into this support more than I normally would, right? So remember, we have to the more stresses that we have in our life, the more we have to also grow our resources in the same way. Alrighty. Now, Carrie-Anne, should I talk about values or should we just jump straight to boundaries?
I think we probably need to set some boundaries. We're starting to lose a few people. I'm sure they've had to go back to work, but I'll move forward to your slide on boundaries if you
yes, please. So I was going to talk about values, and if people want to look at the slides, it's got some, it's actually pretty self-explanatory in lots of ways. So you can kind of do a little inquiry about values and how to set intentions. And I've got a little template there for you all, and please use that. So, but I think we're on boundaries, but I'm just going to read this last quote by Brené Brown because it's great. We desperately need more leaders who are committed to courageous, wholehearted leadership and who are self-aware enough to lead from their hearts rather than unevolved leaders who lead from hurt and fear. You got that?
Oh, and haven't we seen a global reaction to hurt and fear and systemic racism in the last few weeks? I think.
Right. And I think each of us can individually step up and be brave in our own way, and that's going to help us as a community, help us as individuals in a community to kind of demand that from our leaders as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like my headphones are dying, so it's all kind of happening. But boundaries. Okay, so this is really important. I know every single client that I see, I will be having a conversation about boundaries with, and I think it's important for everybody. Okay, so the thing about boundaries is that I think we've been taught really to obey and to please others and to sacrifice ourselves and conform. So setting a boundary can actually feel really risky, and it can actually take us right to the edge of or close to our window of tolerance. Okay, but if we're sort of, if we can relearn how to be in healthy relationships, this benefits all, right? So it just starts with you. It just starts with the next person that sort of starts to set some limits around us. So setting boundaries, as I've got on the slide there, allows for personal protection and allows us to step back and check what's okay and what's not okay. And it can be very empowering to be able to sort of say, actually, this isn't okay. Okay. It protects against burnout. So if you think about a boundary around you, it's kind of like you create a little container where you go, actually, I need to keep some of this for myself. So you don't leak energy out or give it away and then don't have any left for yourself. And boundaries also make room for deeper connection through feeling respected and safe, and it builds trust in that way. So even though for sure you may be setting boundaries with people or situations that you never want to have a part of, thing is you can actually set boundaries with people you really like, and that can actually serve to strengthen bonds and relationships as well. And just a little note for you, highly sensitives or empaths or introverts, if you can learn how to set boundaries, then you're going to be able to enjoy the world a little more without feeling like you're being violated or that you're feeling really depleted and drained all the time. Okay, and I've just got a little mini kind of template if we want to just cross over to the template there. Because I think because it's risky and we're on our window of tolerance, people are not sure how to set a boundary. They're not sure what to say. So this is a fill in the blanks. Okay, so just think about a situation in your own life maybe where you're feeling like you're being encroached upon, and how you might be able to word that to that person or that situation in this way. So this specific behavior is not okay with me anymore. I'd like it if you would this specific action. So a couple of examples I've got here is giving me an urgent last minute task right before I go home is not okay with me anymore. I'd like it if you could give me these tasks much earlier in the day so I have time to finish it, right? So it might feel a little harsh, especially for people who feel a lot, but you know, this will change your life to be able to do that. It really does. It can be life-changing to know that you can set a boundary and actually it's okay. You might be surprised how people respond to it. And I just want to put a little caveat there as well. Do not apologize. So don't, if you can reword that in any way that you want, but I'm just going to suggest don't say I'm sorry but in front of that, please. And cut that out of your emails as well. So save your apologies for when they really, really matter. All right, and boundaries can also be actions as well. So I've given you words, but sometimes even practicing just for yourself, that stop sign, you know, just sort of having your hand up and saying a no, doing no, can be really helpful as well. Just knowing how that no feels in your body. All right, and there's this beautiful quote by my mentor and teacher, Dr. Stair, which kind of, if you can listen and just visualize the words, she was of only herself, contained and powerful and just out of reach in a right way. So very well boundaried. Yeah, you are not going close to that if she doesn't invite you, right? Okay.
Oh, that's a fantastic quote.
Kind of the end. Yeah, it is a great quote. So I've got a little bit of an overview there, but if I can just encourage you all to just start to build up your bank of resources. And maybe practice something just a little outside of your window of tolerance this week. Check the intention template there and maybe make a promise for how you might be able to do that today. And just practice one or two resources, something to activate, something to calm as well. Yeah. All right.
I think this is about like a semester's worth, more than a semester's worth of psychotherapy, and it's been so useful.
It is.
I thought it just might be interesting. You know, I'm very interested in gender and work, and I think we've seen and we've heard a lot about the disproportionate impact on women, you know, of extra workload, the work-life balance, you know, increases in domestic violence. And one of our questions from the audience actually came through, and I wondered if, you know, there might be a relation to boundaries. Now, so the person is saying,
give me a moment. One of my headphones is decided to sort of die. I'm just going to change my head.
Don't you love to?
Okay, I'm back. I am back. So did you want to just rephrase that? Sorry, again.
So, you know, we're just talking about boundaries, and I just did a little, you know, I said how we've seen quite a lot in the media, and perhaps it's the media that I particularly am attracted to, that about the disproportionate impact that, you know, the pandemic has had on women. And one of our listeners has said, it seems that the COVID-19 high stress issues are shouldered more by women, by working women with children. How can we change this? And when I was listening to your stuff on boundaries, I thought, well, you know, well, we can push back. You know, how do we kind of say no? How do we ask for help? How do we, when we're feeling this disproportionate kind of dump?
It's little by little. It's little by little. And I suppose you're talking about something a little bit more systemic there and cultural, that, you know, it may be, you know, in my situation, what can I do to reclaim some time and energy for myself? And it may be, what can I, with boundaries, just think of it in this way. There's a no, there's a not ever, not now and not ever. Okay, so there's no, not now, not ever. So it might be, in this moment, what can I reclaim? You know, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. It might be that something has to be let go of in that point. So, you know, energy is, you know, how much energy do I have for this? It's limited at this point. So I'm going to have to let go of something. This is so that I can actually take or set a limit in this other area.
Yeah, I think
it doesn't feel
workplaces
too
have
clear
got that message that, you know, we weren't just at home, and, you know, I'm not the first person to say this, we weren't just working at home, we were in a pandemic trying to work from home, and we could only do what we could get.
Yeah, and I think it's just like, just do your best. Sometimes it may mean that something has to fall over, or you may have to completely let go of an attitude of perfectionism. You know, and that right at the beginning, it's like that stress is actually highlighting something that's really important. So it might just be a question, you know, how important is this really? And if it's important, can I resource myself to do something about it? If it's not, can I drop it? Can I pass it on to somebody else? Can I let it go? Yeah, it is a lot. And that's a really great question, and I'd love to. I could spend a whole topic, you know, on boundaries on its own, and I've really literally just thrown it in at the end.
All right.
So I'm hoping that I haven't overwhelmed people. I hope I haven't overwhelmed people with too much information. So I just want to emphasize: don't try and do too much. Just make a start. Just start to just dip in and go, well, what if I just started to practice setting a boundary with one person who may not be so threatening, who's it's just a little bit of a encroachment, and see how that works, and test it out, and it'll feel great. It'll feel great in your body. It really will.
I completely hear you. I think boundaries is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves, because we actually have more to give. And then
that's right. Our windows widen.
I think we're probably going to have to wind up. There's a couple more questions, and a lot of people who've had to go have said that they're definitely going to be watching the rest of the webinar afterwards. So thank you so much. It's been, for me, there's been so many valuable reminders and takeaways, and I think we might be all doing our check-in exercise here before a staff meeting, or when we've got to deal with something contentious, or that, you know, just giving people that. I think it took 3 minutes. It felt like a long time when we were doing it, about 3 to 3.5 minutes to feet on the ground. That space, right? Remember your breath, check in with how you're feeling, and then you're refreshed and you go in and you bring a clear perspective. And
that's right. Wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, and you're ready. You kind of see things in a slightly different way. Yeah. And it is, look at it from a different angle.
Well, thank you once again, and I hope that you can join us again, Mandy. We're going to continue with the webinar series as long as we can.
Wonderful.
And I hope that we cross paths.
Yeah, well, I'd love to be invited back, so I'm going to leave that open and up to you and all your members as well. If you and maybe if they're particularly interested in a particular area, and I do have the privilege of being invited back, maybe we can refine it and hone it in on just one little area or just a couple little areas.
Definitely. Oh, I think boundaries opens a big
Yeah, right. That's what everyone was here for. Okay. Thank you, Kerry Ann.
All right, we'll talk again soon.
Okay then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Mandy.